Good evening. It's November 3rd. This is the education meeting, or the education committee meeting, and welcome. Thank you all for being here, either in person or at home. And I'm here with members of the education committee and a number of fellow board members and administrators. Tonight we have on the agenda 2 presentations, or 1 presentation that has 2 components, both the STEM and the high school schedule update. So that should be interesting. Before we get started, I want to thank everybody in the community to time out to come and vote either in person or by mail. Also thank everybody who participated in the different campaigns, and I'm excited that we can move forward and look forward to working with everybody who will be involved. So with that said, I think we're going to move to the announcements.
As our students enjoyed a day off of Halloween, after Halloween, our teachers enjoyed another meaningful day of professional learning. The title of our day was once again Reimagining Teaching and Learning to Empower All Students, and staff was engaged in a variety of learning experiences around topics such as guided reading for our elementary teachers, USTA training for our K-12 health and PE teachers, and easy CBM data analysis and planning. Additionally, we kicked off our K-12 writing work that you heard about last month with over 40 teachers in attendance, and we kicked off our K-12 STEM work, which you'll hear more about in tonight's presentation. I think we had over 50 teachers involved in that. We had over 30 choice sessions led by our own teachers and administrators. We had sessions beginning the day around the high school schedule, which you'll hear about again tonight, and some vision planning for the new Sandy Run, which we'll be sharing at the upcoming education committee.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hoffman. And just in case people wonder, Dr. Yanni is out on the West Coast, invited as a speaker for a conference. So Mr. Hoffman is the man to take the lead from the administration and things. All right, then in terms of the minutes, the members of the committee have a chance to look at the minutes. Are there any comments? No. Then we will move your minutes to the agenda for the legislative meeting as information. All right, great. And that gets us to the presentations. I think we have Mr. Schultz and Mr. Missioner here. Go ahead, please. Thank you.
So tonight we have an update on the high school schedule, which we've been working on for a little over a year now. Mr. Schultz will be updating us on that. Mr. Mishner, similar to Ms. Vandergriff's K-12 writing presentation last month, Mr. Mishner will be here as our new supervisor of STEM to talk to us about K-12 STEM integration. As always, the presentation begins with our 4 pillars of practice that guide our work and then our agenda. So Ms. Evans, if you want to go one more slide from Mr. Schultz.
All right, thank you all very much. Appreciate the opportunity to give an update tonight on where we are with the high school bell schedule. I also wanted to start by thanking Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Mitchner, Mr. Chang. We have 3 master schedulers who have been working with us on this initiative, and we are thrilled to have their expertise as we move forward. I also want to make sure I thank all of the teacher leaders from the various departments who sat in on the scheduling committee that we put together last year to come up with a plan for 2022-2023. Without their input and the input of our staff, our students, and our parents, we wouldn't be where we are right now. So thank you all for the opportunity. You can see the 5 bullets that will be covered tonight. This will not be a lengthy presentation, but I think it will give you a clear picture of where we're headed in the upcoming school year. So important starting, this was a grassroots movement. This was not a central office command, so to speak. This was not a building level administrative initiative. This is something that came from the staff through the IPD process, Instruction Professional Development Council, They brought it up to district IPD, had a request to take a look at our current bell schedule and put together a plan for either keeping it or moving in a different direction in the upcoming years. So, do I have a committee on this here? Oh, great. So, what are the priorities that we established? The first thing we did was we wanted to hear from the three most important groups. We wanted to hear from our students, we wanted to hear from our staff, and we wanted to hear from our parent community. We gave them very, very similar surveys and asked them questions that really will guide decisions into what a bell schedule will look like. They were almost 100% on board with one another in what they proposed to us as priorities. An important side note, the results of the survey are never unanimous, but we had very, very strong majority opinion in what we came up with. So one was longer class periods. One of the benefits to what we have experienced in the last year and a half in terms of altering how we teach and how we look at teaching and learning when we have virtual and blended learning happening is the high school put together a block schedule over that time because we thought it was the best way to meet the needs of students, many of whom would be learning remotely. So we had a chance to experience longer periods, and again, across the board, the majority opinion was, having experienced that, they liked what they had been able to accomplish, they liked the deeper learning that was happening, they liked the opportunity to have individual and small group work happening throughout the day, and they liked the chance to develop and extend topics where in a shorter class period you just can't do as effectively. There was a desire for consistency. The schedule that we currently have is a block schedule, but it took our old 5-day block schedule and it broke it down into an odd and an even day. And if you counted my fingers there, when you have a 5-day schedule and you go odd even, you now have a 10-day schedule. Consistency is what we're all looking for moving forward, and when you see the results of that, you'll understand kind of where I'm coming from. Student choice. Again, in all three levels, the result was we want to empower our students to make decisions for themselves, both during the individual school day, over the course of the year, and that includes both academics and extracurriculars. Student choice helped drive the number of periods that we wanted, and it also helped drive some creative options that we're looking at that we can implement during the school day to give students that choice and that voice. And then finally, in-time support. We have been able to offer office hours last year. This year we have something similar called a SOAR period. We are looking at different options to expand and improve upon that in the future. But the idea is during the course of the day, do students have an opportunity to meet with one another, meet with staff, and get support and enrichment as they want and when they want. So what is that schedule going to look like? It's a simple A-B block schedule. That means that you'll have 4 classes on an A day, 4 classes the next day on B day, and then it will continue. That's that consistency part. So 4 classes will meet each day for a total of 8 periods that the students will have. We also will be implementing semester courses in the upcoming school year to again expand on that choice and take away from our current model, which is a long time coming, but it's a little clunky where some of your classes would be 2 out of 5 days, some will be 3 out of 5 days. Moving to semesters, we get more consistency and we get more continuity of instruction. The class periods will be approximately 80 periods in length. We have the drafts of a couple of options, but 80 minutes is the ballpark figure for all of them. And we will continue to have a homeroom period at the beginning of the day. That's something that we did away with last year when a lot of the time, especially in the beginning, we were remote. That homeroom period allows students to make a connection with one more staff member and to develop that relationship over the course of 4 years. We found that to be very important, not just for dispensing information, but also for having assembly programs, for having deeper kind of level conversations, and again, just getting to know one more staff member in kind of a close and personal way. So that will be the structure of the day in 2022, 2023. And then finally, for the next steps, I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Hoffman. We have a timeline that we have developed, and we will continue to update the board with those presentations. But for some of the pieces of this, we'll give it back to Mr. Hoffman.
So we will continue to collaborate with the board to update you all as we work through this process. As Mr. Schultz shared, shifting from a 7-period day to an 8-period day allows that access opportunity choice that I often share with you all, but it also means that the number of credits that students may receive will increase. And so that obviously impacts policy that we would want to look through with you all in the coming months as we start to hone in on exactly what those numbers look like. We'll share more in that time with you. We're continuing to collaborate with UDEA along the way so that we are having meaningful conversations and continuing to move forward, both in terms of what that schedule looks like, what the choices look like, the number of periods that teachers teach, etc. Our program studies and program planning will happen as it typically does in January, February. I'll ask for your all's flexibility with that in case it ends up being a February instead of a January discussion, or a January discussion instead of December. So we're working on that timeline, but confident with the team and with, as Mr. Schultz said, a schedule that is built with a bit more consistency can build much easier in a system. That process will be easier with us. And then over February, so this is dates for you all. So February, June are 2 of our PLE days. We have 2 days in February and 2 or 3 in June. Those days will be used to determine what kind of curriculum development, the ongoing curriculum revision, staff training, etc., and that may extend over the summer as well. Part of this is giving us an opportunity to, as part of the curriculum review cycle that I've shared with you all, and part of this process, it's allowed teachers to think, to talk to students, to explore some classes at peer districts and national colleges, to see what kind of classes we might want to offer our students that we're not currently offering. And there's been some really exciting ideas that I'm really excited to highlight with you all. But first, we'll take those through the process internally before we bring them here. But I'm really excited about this possibility. And our teachers and students and parents have been wonderful through this process. So we will move now to Mr. Mishner's presentation, and then we'll open up to questions at the end of this. Chris, thank you.
Kind of surreal for me. Our first full presentation on the world, master. Here we go. I'm excited to share our STEM update with you. Instead of you listening to me talk for a minute here, I made a quick video. If you could start there for me. So as you can see, while STEM, the acronym does stand for science, technology, engineering, and math, and I do supervise those areas, I really want to encourage us as a district to think of STEM as a process, a mindset, not tied to any individual subject area. I'm sure you've heard of STEAM or STREAM or eSTEM or even Hamster. I've heard about it in the last couple of months where humanities gets put into the mix. But STEM is to me much more of a mindset that will be used across curricular areas, not tied to any 1, 2, 3, 4 subject areas. So long-term goals, what we want to look at is promoting that mindset, obviously tied to GA standards across curricular areas, prioritize skills over facts, prioritize STEM over crafts. I'll talk a little bit more about our Monday PLE day in a bit, but one of the talking points we had on Monday with our large group of K-12 STEM BS participants was this difference between STEM activities and crafts. One of the activities you'll see if you look up STEM activities on the internet is a marshmallow tower challenge, where you give kids a bag of marshmallows, a box of spaghetti, and say, 10 minutes to build the tallest tower you can. Kids love it, it's fun, it's engaging, but it's kind of a craft. So what we talked about is take that activity, let's give students an opportunity to research what makes the basis of a solid foundation, what makes a skyscraper able to be so tall. What if we gave them a variety of materials? What if we put a price tag on each of those materials? And it resulted in a presentation that at the end where a drawing, a sketch of it, and any building as a team, you present, and the winner is not the tallest tower, the winner is the best ratio of height to cost. So you're tying in social studies, you're tying in math, you're tying in science, you're tying in engineering, you're tying in the research piece, again, across curricular areas. And I've talked to Brina, talked with both of them very much with the same mindset that we need to have a K-12 research alignment. ELA and STEM should not be happening in isolation, so we're going to collaborate together over the years to make that happen. And the STEM skills over there on the right, as you can see, they are not skills that are tied to science, technology, and engineering. So, long-term goals over there, here are some this year short-term goals. We wanted to explore the what, how, and why of STEM. Vision for STEM in the school district. Complete a STEM rubric, an audit of sorts, and prioritize and set goals for achieving that vision for STEM education. How do we do that? Well, we were fortunate to have a large group of teachers from kindergarten through AP at the high school meet on Monday. Steph Schwab from the IU, fortunately, come in and walk us through really a four-step process. So we spent the morning on vision and what is STEM and what we believe it to be. And then in the afternoon, we completed the rubric and began to set some goals. Ultimately, what we'll have then the rest of this year is ongoing differentiated supervision work at all different levels of the described here in the morning. A couple things we worked through in the morning just to give you an update. We had all of the teachers individually, they were given 30 different descriptors of why STEM is important. And those 30 descriptors fell in one of these 5 high-impact areas. Teacher had to go through and take the 5 that spoke most to them, that would be most meaningful, and we put them in groups, K to 12 groups. So you were in a group of elementary school, middle school, high school, and you had to agree as a K to 12 group what 5 were most important to you as a group. And ultimately, we took all those groups, came together and made a consensus as a large group, what was our priority area. Honestly, I was really nervous that was going to take a long, long time. To my surprise, and I was really excited to see that we very quickly came to the consensus that literacy and competency and student investment were the high impact areas that we wanted to focus on as a group. Really, really awesome to see that K-12 alignment come together so quickly. We then asked teachers to start talking. What is STEM? Again, K-12 groups, 9 or 10 different groups, all had to come up with a presentation. What is STEM? Gave time to research, come back to us. Came to agreement, again, very, very quickly, that STEM is a problem-solving process with real-world context. It's cross-curricular, it's collaborative, it's critical thinking, 21st century skills, and it's creative. Extend that a little bit further. What do we believe about STEM? We believe it should be student-centered. We believe it should be engaging, inclusive and equitable, multidisciplinary, intentional, and involve trial and error with reflection. Reflection being a key piece there. Trial and error alone doesn't get us anywhere. We need to reflect on why it did work, why it didn't work, so we can improve for the next time. Again, a mindset, not a subject area. So where do we go from here? Really excited to work with teachers. We had, in the afternoon, we did our audit. What are we doing currently? Where can we go? High school teachers developed 3 different differentiated supervision projects. One's going to work on the STEM mission and vision. Another will be a curriculum mapping to technology and computing skills. And finally, a biotechnology course that promotes community partnerships. Middle school, we really need to see that all of the middle school teachers across the subject areas decided to integrate STEM activities and assessments into multiple curricular areas. So the entire middle school group decided to have one collective BS project together. Really excited to work with them on that. The elementary level, 4 different BS projects that emerged. Grade level STEM activities inserted into science is going to be their entry point, but they got to be able to tie in the social studies, tie in the ELA, books that they're reading, and things like that. Collaborating with gifted teachers on STEM activities, making a Google site to house STEM resources. Because this concept of a STEM DS is something that I want to extend year to year. Some teachers will stay with it for a couple of years, some will go away and come back, but we keep expanding the thought process and get more and more people involved. And finally, the library specialists are going to collaborate on what STEM activities they're already doing, so we can get some consistency across the district. That's where we are. I look forward to giving you an update toward the end of the year or early next year on where we end up. I'm excited to work with all of those teachers on their DS vectors.
Thank you for both presenters for your presentation. Let's have some opportunity for discussion, questions from members of the committee. Diane?
Okay. So when we talk about additional electives at the high school, and I want to hear more about that, and I'm wondering, I know there's an issue when students get to be sophomores where they don't have a lot of room in their schedule, like especially if they have a sport class that they go to. So will this address that, or is that other work that we need to do?
Yes, this schedule will address that. Right now, that's part of what Mr. Schultz was saying. With a 5-day schedule where classes meet 2 or 3 days, it creates some conflicts, so they can't fit in that week something in a 7-period day that matches up against that 2-day or 3-day class. So an A-B schedule means that you have 1, 2, 3, 4 on an A day, 5, 6, 7, 8 on a B day. Every other day all year. But then we'll have some that will meet half of the year as an elective, so every other day until January, every other day from January to June. So there will, and with shifting from a 7-period day to an 8-period day, it's also expanding those opportunities.
That's great, that is great.
Ms. Branson.
Thanks very much for those presentations. As a parent of a high schooler, I'm keenly interested in this, but I think the whole community knows that this has been a work long in process, and really excited with the team that we have in place to do it. I have a question about, sort of to follow on the heels of Ms. Ainiti. The music program has suffered, like many programs, around COVID and access to being able to play, arts, similarly drama, theater. So I am curious how this schedule will allow that program to be rebuilt and to flourish, because I know for many that's a huge co-curricular aspect of their education as well.
So again, that will hopefully be addressed with this schedule, where we're looking at band, orchestra, choir being first and foremost a 1.0 class that will meet every other day all year, so that there is a full year program that's being established, and not those situations where they're saying, please come 1 day if you can, or 2 days if you can, and split that time between band and chorus if you can. There was a lot of choices that were being made as a result of that. We also recognize potentially the need, though, to lay over top of that 1.0 2.5s on top of that, so that if a student has some sort of a conflict, there's flexibility there for that student to maintain that involvement, or to try a course or an option with time.
Thank you.
So following up a little bit on what Amy was just talking about, I'm really intrigued by the semester classes concept, 0.5, as you mentioned, to try to address, sounds like at least to try to address some of the challenges in especially the music and stuff that could have, 1 day a week kind of scenarios to just sort of try to squeeze in a little bit here and there. And so instead, it sounds like it would be half a year if you can, and then half a year doing something else. And then, so does that expand past, and maybe this is really more of a program studies, I don't know if this is a program studies question or a scheduling question, but does that expand past those existing less than 1.0 classes? Is the model that everything eventually works towards semester classes, and you're going to pick classes basically twice a year instead of once a year? Or is that half year just really the solution to this one problem?
I think So adopting an A-B schedule, we would pick classes once a year. There is a block schedule. Central Blocks, as an example, does a 4x4 schedule that you have 4 classes first semester and then all new classes second semester. The model that we're looking at, because of priority areas from our 3 stakeholder groups, looking for consistency, the extended period, et cetera, that our 1.0 classes will go all year, 36 weeks every other day. Our elective classes may be a full year elective or maybe a half credit elective. So it's going to depend on kind of what the course is, what the content is, and what the best, band as an example is an elective, but it would be a full year elective. Speech and debate, I don't know, off the top of my head, 1. It may be a full year elective. Other electives may be looking at, some of our teachers are saying, thinking about the current elective that is a full year elective, does it make more sense splitting it into? Our art teachers have talked to me a little bit about, rather than having course X, maybe splitting that into 2 parts to allow students to explore 2 different types of art over the course of a year, which our current program doesn't allow for.
Okay, so my opinion on that, I'd love to, and I know that this is hard, but I'd love to advocate for pushing for those half-year classes, even if it only starts in the elective areas. Because what happens right now, I think, for many, many students is because even the arts, the progression is, you start at, whatever it is, level 1, then you're going to work up the ladder until you get to whatever AP. And it's just progression here. That becomes your thing. And you can't do other things because you're spending one of your whole slots every year on that thing because you're in a progression. You're not trying out this and trying out that for a semester at a time. And I really think that serves us very well for those kids who are really interested in that thing. It serves us very poorly for the kids who might just want to, fill a schedule with something that really interests them, but is not a career direction. But of course, I realize that that's hard. I mean, teachers have to create half your classes. That's a big process. It's not something you do with the schedule. It's something you do more with program studies over time. But to the extent that the schedule allows for that, I'd really love to see that happen. And my vision really is, and it's great to start with the electives, but I don't see why that can't happen in ELA also, or other core subjects. The other question I have is just, and this may be, I'm not sure if this is a program of studies or scheduling or even a policy question, but there was a hint about, 10th grade right now is a problem because of health as a requirement in 10th grade. Does this address that by allowing health does health still have to be in 10th grade and take that time, or is there flexibility in that? And how does that sort of solve the 10th grade conundrum? I don't have a clear picture of how this solves the 10th grade conundrum.
So, do you want to go?
Because I think it got some of these questions.
Try that again. So what our health and phys ed teachers are proposing is to take their 9th and 10th grade courses, have a component of health and a component of physical education in each grade level, have it meet every other day for a semester in a semester-based course, and that way they're still taking, so it'll now be a 0.5 PE class and health class, so it doesn't jam them up into this problem. Good things that so it doesn't encumber their schedule, especially in 10th grade, with that additional class period. It will be part of a 9th and 10th grade package where they get a little bit both years, which we also feel for health allows for grade appropriate and age appropriate topics to be taught in real time.
Great. Okay. And then, so as a follow-up to that, is any part of this process tied to any review of the number of credits necessary for things like to graduate? I mean, for
Yes.
health and
Yes.
PE and science and all the things that are not, standard.
Yes. Yes, that'll come to policy, next policy meeting. We're just getting to this point with the schedule, so that would be the next step. And really, we're looking, as a preview, we're looking to mirror, it's nice when you have people like Mr. Mishner and Mr. Chang, working with numbers as an English guy. They're looking at, current number of courses that students can take versus the number that are required to graduate versus the number that they're required to take each year as an Upper Dublin High School student, taking those percentages and moving them into a new schedule, which would look at 32 potential credits, how many classes, so just pairing that way. So ordering all of that. The AR actually outlines what all of the specific classes are and what that looks like, but the policy itself is that state graduation requirement that we're going to be going through policy.
Of course, and so, just as a reminder, part of the driver for that is it's such a challenge, and maybe this is a separate question too. How does the new schedule and those sorts of requirements impact, for example, kids who want to go to Eastern, which is, right now a real limitation for them?
Mr. Schultz,
We made sure that our Eastern students will not be negatively impacted whatsoever by the new schedule. So they will still be able to take the courses they want here. They will actually have more freedoms in that because we're expanding to 8 as opposed to 7, and they will still be able to get all their graduation credits taken care of, in addition to having some choice and making sure that they can prioritize their work there in the afternoons.
Great, and hopefully with additional flexibility, we can get our Eastern numbers up a little bit. Because I think a lot of people choose not to do Eastern because they're basically forced to give up something that they don't otherwise want to give up. Thanks.
Just a couple of questions. One, Mark actually asked some of the questions that I had, and he talked about Eastern. I'm also wondering if how this schedule impacts those students that may be involved in dual enrollment classes. Does that fit into the 80-minute period? So I'd like an answer on that. Also, I'm wondering if indeed there are any other schools that are following this particular AD schedule in our area, and if so, what have you learned from them to inform what we're doing?
So, this is the first question. Dual enrollment, right? So dual enrollment will not be impacted by this. We're actually looking, it may provide, as we're looking at what the agreements look like and knowing that we have the 2-semester option, we're looking at what that may actually provide additional access for our students. So we're currently exploring that with those agreements. Regarding the schedule, we looked, we looked both at local districts and peer districts. Dr. Young often cites our 10 peer districts and several other districts that utilize this schedule both locally and nationally. We've learned about some of those simple pillars of keeping consistent schedules and keeping things as structured as possible to embrace that. But I think what I'm most proud of, and I don't know if Chris or Bob would add anything here, but one of the things I'm most proud of is that we set out to identify or to build a schedule that met the 3 priority areas for our new schedule. So as Mr. Schultz said, this was a grassroots effort that was posed by many of the things that Ms. Ainetti was referencing, both of you mentioning, all of you mentioning Eastern access, and jammed up is an okay word for what it was. Even to the point where Eastern students would have to look at math or science in one year and then the alternate the next. And so we really looked to build a schedule that addressed what we believe each Upper Dublin High School student should have access to. And so while anything you look at to learn lessons, to look at how we use instructional minutes, et cetera, I think the work that we've been doing around blended learning, about providing access and opportunity to our students, that's only being enhanced by the schedule that we've come to. So definitely looking at other schools that use it, but I think our instructional model that we're using is very different than what's happening in some other schools.
And again, how would this schedule impact anything around our Cardinal Academy and, different opportunities when students aren't in school?
With Cardinal Academy?
Well, any virtual opportunity if indeed, students are out, and we're trying to make sure that we're able to meet all their needs, in an 8-minute.
Got it. I do think that having more time provides, more time in a class provides more opportunities for students and teachers to collaborate. And so we're seeing teachers in the building that are utilizing currently block scheduling to check in with students, to include students using Google Sleep options to collaborate. So that's happening. I think focusing on 4 classes every other day also really helps students focus and compartmentalize on the needs of that day, and not be overwhelmed by 5, 6, 7 classes that they're missing every time they're out. So that also is going to help.
Are you taking STEM questions as well right now? Okay, because we sort of focused on the one. Okay, I really appreciated, the presentation, and I'm really excited about the collaboration that's going around with everyone on these 2 initiatives. So just kind of throwing it out, whenever you are doing something new and different, there are challenges. So with the STEM program, what are you seeing as your immediate challenges to pulling this all together?
I think it's a great question, because foreseeing the obstacles is certainly an important part of the process. I think the biggest obstacle is going to be, we had 40-some people in our presentation on Monday, which is a great number, but it's only 40-some people that are working now on a DS through this year. And so I think expanding and creating that consistency across grade levels and buildings is going to be one of my biggest challenges as we get this rolling over the next year or 2. And predicting the supplies and materials that we're going to need in advance as we move through. So those are the 2 that are on my mind right now that we're going to have to work through.
Are there plans in terms of professional development days? I know you're beginning to build that even for next year to provide additional time or focus areas so that we can keep this going and make sure that it's done the way we want it to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is just kind of the tip of the iceberg, so to speak, in terms of getting some momentum, getting some excitement, getting some discussion around what we're doing in terms of, again, STEM activities instead of crafts and science and math in compartments. So as those activities spread, building them up, spreading them, communicating them during PLE days, during grade level meetings, those types of things are all on the radar screen, absolutely.
Thank you. More questions? Yes, go ahead.
I'd like to go back to the schedule aspect for 2 questions. They're sort of related. The first is, I know the one issue that sometimes students face in AP classes, sciences, is that it becomes a 6th period or 6-day class, effectively the black. Does the new schedule in the longer periods seek to address that issue, or how will that interplay at all?
It wasn't a priority in terms of what I shared, but we were very cognizant of the fact that we put students in an unwinnable situation when that AP lab is in the middle of their AP English class, their level 4, level 5 world language class. We will no longer have conflicts with AP labs in the new schedule.
Great, thank you. And I guess a related question, picking up on the word conflicts. I know from time to time we experience that in high school with students. And it could be for a variety of factors, whether it be what we just talked about, or an arts class that's only given once a day, things like that, limitations. By going to this schedule, do we anticipate being able to lessen? Right now, we don't have a lot of conflicts, but they exist. Do we think this schedule will help to lessen that? Will it make it about the same? Hopefully not exacerbate it? Does anybody have a sense from a scheduling perspective? Maybe it's too early to answer that, I don't know.
Scheduling in multiple districts over the years, there will always be conflicts. There's no, algorithm that gets it 100% perfect. I think a lot of that comes to really planned program planning over the scope of multiple years and really developing a plan to make sure. So we always look to avoid that when possible, but there's a singleton is a class that has one section. The students that request 2, 3, or 4 singletons, there's really no way to avoid this conflicts.
I was just wondering if there's any studies that, block schedules of this type, ameliorate that in any way just by the way the schedules are built. Maybe that's an impossible question, and I apologize if it is.
Chris likes impossible questions.
To the previous one. I think by nature, the 8-period schedule will alleviate some of the conflicts that exist. At the same time, I think there's potential, when we talk about singleton or doubleton classes that run in a semester, now they also have to puzzle. And so it's going to be interesting to see. I think the more semester options we have, the better it will be in terms of reducing conflict. But in general, having that extra period, assuming that every kid is not taking 8 classes, should alleviate some of the conflicts that we've had to deal with over the last several years.
Great, thanks so much.
All right, now back to the schedule. But I actually think this could be for a future meeting. And I promise I'll come and attend from the audience if you talk about it. The SOAR period, which has been implemented this year as sort of the reimagining of, study hall, et cetera, seems an awesome opportunity to leverage time with instructors that's different than the class period. Just anecdotally, I hear different stories about different teachers, how they're utilizing it, how it's monitored, how it's being used for different things, retaking tests versus direct feedback versus small group. I mean, it's all over the place. So I would love at some point for the committee to be able to hear a bit more about what's being done, what's being imagined for the future, if there's PD around that, because it feels to me like, there are some things that maybe got a little rusty in the COVID year, test-taking skills, some executive functioning. We've got this Mind Up program now, like where is that being incorporated and can we leverage there? So maybe a presentation about SOAR at some point as a core part of this would be helpful.
Yes, and that was something that also is, I think, a priority area across the board with some sort of time in our day that allows that access to teachers and to peers, and just for some a break that they need to, not be going through 4 back-to-back 9-minute periods. It's in addition to all of those things you added, it's such a good way to help students learn how to use unstructured, flexible time, both as an incentive and as it's a life lesson when they go to college or work to know I have X amount of time today, how do I use it? How do I connect with a resource? How do I connect with people? Yeah.
All right, I have a couple questions, but Ms. Ainani, you wanted to make a comment? Go ahead.
Earlier Mark said something, this was about schedule, about having the cafeteria electives. And I just wanted to add, I think that's a great idea. And also, it's such a big commitment, say with photography or whatever classes. A student might not want to take it for a whole year, but might be willing to stretch themselves a little bit and take that half year. So I do hope to see some of this in this.
Yes, and that is the plan. The semester classes are the plan. For that purpose, the art example, that right now a student would be locked into 2D all year, as opposed to maybe I want to dabble a little and sketch for half of the year and then, painting for the other half of the year. It allows them to access different models or to try public speaking or, a science course provided technology or something. So it provides a lot of flexibility in this ways.
Can I just add just a little bit of context to that point that, for example, if you wanted to dabble right now, there are some overview classes which are half-period classes, but if you want to dabble in theater and you're a senior, you're going to take theater 1 with all the freshmen. So that's the kind of, it's not just within the year with the question, it's across the years that I think we need to build up some flexibility.
That's not my question. It was about the STEM presentation. So there was something said, and I think this is great, because I have not thought about it this way, that STEM is a way of thinking, like the way, and certain disciplines, like engineers are taught to think a certain way. So I'm imagining, will they have a common language, and will students see a problem and then the scientific method, or do they have something like that they'll be working on?
It's a great point, and I didn't think too much time talking about what happened Monday in our PLE day, but one of the common themes that emerged at the end was the need for, I'm going to say a rubric, but like you just said, a common language that we're using K through 12 when we talk about STEM thought process and mindset that can be built up from really a basic level in kindergarten and primary grades all the way through our EP classes. And so, yes, that's not an official DS project that's happening right now, but there's a group of people that are really interested in getting some common language and continuity K-12 on that.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you. I wanted to go back to a couple of things on both parts of the presentation. First of all, the next steps and the timeline for the next steps. Especially with respect to the program of studies, I think this new schedule could really impact people's choices. So do you think do you think you can have a program of studies by January, February with some of these semester courses and a clear set of choices for every grade level, but also across grade levels? Because it seems to me that it's a pretty hefty amount of work that needs to be done in preparation for that.
Our team works really hard and we're working through that. So starting with what we have, never from scratch. So we do have that work and we're confident in January.
Okay, then the other thing is, with all of these I'm very excited about the fact that this seems to be very much coming as a grassroots level, that there's a lot of energy for different stakeholders. But with all of this, you also need a decent amount, I think, of collaboration time. And I know that DS is a part, the differentiated supervision model. It provides some of that. But throughout the year and throughout the schedule, how is that collaboration between teachers, especially if you're going to integrate things, how is that going to work in this schedule?
For building the schedule or for the new schedule?
No, once you have this new schedule, how is the collaboration going to be accommodated for teachers?
So collaboration is always a priority, and I think we build our professional learning days around that. We have time on our day built to value collaboration time. And then the ongoing staff development and differentiated supervision projects. Our teachers continue to emphasize how much they value the time that they've been given, and so I think that our teachers will continue to use that time.
But I think my question is more, will that time still be there, and is that going to be an essential part of the whole schedule? I would like that to be the case, I just want to make sure.
Sure, yeah.
Okay. Right. Let me see. In terms of policy, what do you, I have the feeling that as you're having 8 periods, that potentially there's opportunity for, clearly for more credits. Are you also looking at maybe raising the minimum requirements for graduation? Because I believe we are on the lower end.
Yes, we're currently only required the state minimum of 21 credits. Our students are required to schedule 24 credits over the 4 years, so 6.4, 6.4, 5.8, 5.8. So of the 24 that they're required to take, they must pass the minimum of 21. I'll go over this in policy when we share that, but all but 3 years ago, all but 3 students were above 24 credits already. 2 years ago, all but 8, and last year, 15 were below 24 but above the 21, and that was a result of last year. So most of our students already do that, and so that was the understanding that shifting those numbers to a 32 period over 4 years, that those numbers will be comparable.
Good, great. Then in the schedule, I saw there's a you mentioned home. Is home gonna be, do you envision that to be an opportunity for a longer period of time, like a half an hour, where you can actually communicate? I mean, go to maybe some of the social or the sort of some topics that may be relevant to students that are not fitting necessarily in a particular curriculum, but are good topics to discuss with students, or is it really going to be an opportunity, a 5-minute check-in time?
So the plan for right now is to continue something similar to what we have in our current schedule, where it will be a 10-minute period, where it will be more of a check-in and relationship building time. We are beginning to have discussions as to what we might be able to do to expand that. That could occur during homeroom. That could also occur during a flexible period or an office hour type of approach. But for what we have planned for the upcoming school year, it will be 10 minutes at the beginning of the day.
All right. And then a number of students right now have study halls. Do you see an opportunity for this to maybe, I mean, if you have an 80-minute study hall, I'm not sure that is for some students, or I think for some students that will be a very long period of study halls. Are you looking to reduce that study hall, the number of the frequency and the number of study halls by doing this?
That relates, I think, a bit to some of the previous questions about the number of required courses that students will take out of any period day. We do anticipate the number of study halls being reduced because there will be other opportunities during the day for access to teachers. So that's what we anticipate. At this point, we're not putting a hard line on how many they can have. I don't disagree with your 80-minute study hall length comment.
Good. Then, yes, the electives that, especially after electives, to me has been something that's been a long time on my wish list. So I hope to see some really interesting electives and not just the same electives or topics that we've been seeing, but also opportunity to really be somewhat to be innovative and hopefully build on some of the energy that is there to really explore things, and especially integrate between disciplines.
And I do believe that the development of those semester courses and of our elective courses will not be a one-shot deal. I think that's a conversation we're going to be having over the next few years with all of you as we to your program studies comments. When we get our program studies approved in January, over the next 3, 4, 5 years, we anticipate that being a kind of a trend and a theme.
Okay, great. Then to the STEM, and the STEM as a mindset, I think that really appeals to me. I'm wondering though, since the community or the world as a whole, or the concept of STEM is maybe ingrained in people as just sort of distinct topics, as opposed to a way of mindset. So how are you going to communicate that and really explain that so people understand that this form of STEM, so to speak, is maybe not exactly the form of STEM that people traditionally are thinking of?
So I think it's a great point, it's not an easy process, but I think it's consistency, it's communication, and I think it's really, to steal one of Bob's words earlier, it's really a grassroots effort. I really think that the word of mouth, when students are starting to integrate multiple subject areas in an activity at home, talk about it at home, we talk about it with friends, we talk about it across classes, on buses, on field trips. I think that's the way it's going to spread best. We'll be consistent on our message and start spreading that at all levels. But I do think it's going to take time, it's going to take consistency, it's going to take word of mouth.
Yeah, because this is not going to happen overnight. This is a work in progress. And again, I mean, it seemed that it was somewhat of an organic process, but at the same time, it's not. I have the feeling that there is a very clear view or vision behind it. Are there certain criteria that you can share or have shared with the staff or with students or other stakeholders that you feel are totally essential components of this? Because I think right now it's a pretty general kind of concept. So are there more specifics that you can share?
There are. I have in my head what my definition would be, but I do think in terms of building consensus, and I was again really encouraged but these are voluntary participants in the DS this year. So for us to have come to collective thought processes very quickly was encouraging to me. Again, one of the DS projects that's emerging that I'm going to work with the high school team on is developing a collective vision and mission for the district. And so I don't want it to be about me. I want it to be about what the community needs, what students need, and what teachers are able to do. And so we can throw all the buzzwords around we want, unless we have to put the ground out.
No, the implementation is ultimately what counts. So that's going to be a presentation for the future, I guess, or multiple presentations probably.
Ongoing.
All right, great. Are there other questions? No? See none? All right, then I want to thank the presenters, Mr. Schultz and Mr. Altman for bringing this to us, and I expect we'll hear a lot more in the future. So that gets us to item 6 on our agenda, educational agreement. Mr. Altman, any comments on that?
This is authorized approval of an independent education evaluation for a special education student. This was funded in the general fund, budgeted for in the general fund.
Questions, comments? So we'll move this on to the legislative agenda. Then the conferences, anything on those that we need to vote the board consider?
No, these are both deemed necessary to administration.
I'll move that on to legislative. No. All right, thank you. Then that gets us to item 7 on the agenda, the community input. If there's anybody here present who wants to speak to the board, not seeing anybody. We have received 2 comments from the community, from 2 community members that prior to the meeting, so I will read those. The first one is from Aaron Stein from Washington. I would like to address the current high school schedule and the 90 minutes of teacher hours every day. Is there any alternate use of this time for students? It seems like an excessive amount of daily free time if there is no help needed from a teacher. Would the school consider offering enhancements again like they used to? This amount of free time each day cannot be the best option for many students. I know the schedule will be changing for next year, but can we please make some changes to the schedule this year? These kids have lost too much and the seniors are out of time. And then the second comment was from Lisa Burns, Fort Washington. The board agreed to a quarantining plan without having an education plan to go hand in hand. And today we have approximately 23 students quarantined at home, not receiving equitable education to their peers that are in the buildings. You continue to say at board meetings that you have a plan in place, but I've spoken to parents with quarantined children, and this is not happening. Why was the decision to not have an education plan to go with the quarantine plan okay with the board? Why did the board not push for an equitable learning plan for the quarantine? Why did the board not reach out to parents and ask for input on ways they felt their children would learn best if they ended up in this situation? And that is the extent of the community input. So at this point, I want to close the community input and ask anybody, if they want to speak up, Mr. Hoffman would like to go first.
Yes.
Please go ahead.
Regarding the first question about the high school schedule, it's timely we discussed many of those questions tonight, but the current schedule has that odd even schedule with 4 classes on odd days and 3 on even days, since we have a 7-period schedule on an 8-period block at this point. Last period, as Mr. Schultz said, is being used for students to cycle through 2 of their classes for 42 minutes at a time. And this doesn't happen every day, it happens every other day. The request for this time came from students, parents, and teachers as a part of that survey. So this time was requested, as Mr. Schultz noted. The time is providing students, as Ms. Franczyk mentioned, an opportunity, valuable opportunity for students to get support, enrichment from their teachers, to collaborate with their peers, to visit other teachers who have posted office hours. We had some homecoming activities a week ago that was able to utilize that 8th period, which then resulted in us not losing any instructional minutes during the school day for those other classes. And as I mentioned, learning to use this flexible time is really important for students to develop, especially those seniors that were mentioned. I will say the high school team is continuing to collaborate with me in my office about how the SOAR time may evolve over the course of the year. Regarding the question about quarantine instruction, teachers of students that are quarantining are reaching out and communicating with families and students daily to ensure that they are not behind. On a typical day, students are not sitting and receiving a teacher talking to them the entire time, but do have access throughout the day when they're in school or out at this point to materials and resources to complete the work, to access the content. Teachers are communicating with teachers and students are collaborating with peers. Regarding the statement that this isn't happening, I would encourage any parents of quarantine students that believe that that is not happening to reach out to first the teacher and then following the steps of communication outlined on the website, because none of these issues have come to me that that's not happening for our quarantine students. So I would encourage parents of those children to reach out to their schools.
Right, any further comments on the board? Yes. Mr. Roman.
Just a thought regarding the SOAR time, and bringing it back to a previous conversation about STEM. I think there's a bit of common language that I think we don't have that might help address, because, and I know it's new, so it's understandable, and that kind of common language evolves over time, and things are, takes a culture change, which is an effort, but I've heard from actually multiple students that the way it's described as, well, the teachers aren't allowed to teach anything. And so it's basically, and I interpret that to mean, well, the teachers aren't allowed to deliver new content.
Anything new.
Right, yeah, but that's not how the students are internalizing it, or at least not how they're relaying it. And so, some sort of development of a common description and purpose of the time that eventually sort of permeates the culture is, I think, probably what's necessary to get over that hurdle.
And like you said, that comes over time, continuing to develop and reinforce that. Yep.
All right, any other comments? No? Then we'll move on to item 8 of the agenda, and that is to let you know that our next meeting will be on Wednesday, December 1st at 6:15. Prior to that meeting, there will be a reorganization meeting. And so we'll start a little bit later with the education meeting, and that is at this point 7:04, and I'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you all for attending.
Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our November Policy Committee meeting at the Upper Dublin Board of School Directors. It is November 3rd, and it is now 7:08 p.m. Welcome, everyone. This meeting is called to order. We have Dr. Yanni traveling, for those who might just be joining us, out doing a presentation on the West Coast, and Ms. Ashley Kitten here to answer any potential questions, but we will go ahead and proceed with our meeting. Ms. Kitten, were there any announcements?
No, there were not.
Okay, thanks so much. Colleagues on the committee, we have minutes from our October meeting. Any comments or questions regarding those? Everybody comfortable moving those forward to legislative? Thank you. Thank you. All right, so this evening we are going to discuss not a huge amount of policy, and we're going to start as we always do with our second readings. This month we're going to be talking about policy 201, admission of kindergartners and beginners. I don't know that we have any specific comments or questions. Sometimes Dr. Yanni will sort of like give us a little background. Does anyone on the committee have anything that they'd like to share or discuss? We have been through this policy once at the last month's meeting.
Amy, I do.
Thank you.
Actually, not within the policy, but within the AR. And
Okay.
I want to be, careful not to micromanage the AR here, but I have in the AR, it says, no child may be admitted to first grade unless the child has or will attain the chronicle age of 5 years and 7 months or more by the day of the first school term, and that is not the same language that we see in the policy. Unless it's not 100% in direct conflict with within the policy, but I just encourage the administration before this goes through to completion to ensure that language is what is intended.
You're correct. Thank you. That's a good catch.
Yep, I will note that. I'm sure it's on Dr. Yanni's list, but I'll make sure that we do that in the appropriate time.
Excellent. Anybody else from the committee or the board in general have any comments or questions about this policy? Just checking, no? Okay, so seeing none, is the committee comfortable moving this forward to the legislative meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. All right, next up we have now our first readings. So these are ones that we have not yet discussed. Oh, I'm sorry, I lied. It's 2 repeated first reads. I apologize. Mr. Wall kindly filled in for me last month as chair, and I'm forgetful of by the end of my tenure here. So we can go over those 2 repeated first reads because there were some edits made, and then we'll talk about 2 new items. So 202, policy 202, eligibility of non-resident students. It looks to me, I'm just checking, in case Dr. Yanni has something to tell us. Dr. Yanni says, tell everyone we will do the AR after the policy is approved on the last one. So, from the plane, I believe he said that. Thank you, Dr. Yanni. So, really, this is regarding the relative requirements for non-resident students who want to attend Upper Dublin schools if they reside out of our sending area. So does anyone on the committee or board at large have any comments or questions about the revised proposal for this repeated first reading?
Ms. Francis, just by way of background from the last time, since
Please.
we're here, just to make it clear to everyone. I think 2 of the main changes, why is it back for our first read again, is that some of the guidelines were added or augmented. And Dr. Yanni also, as he had promised last month, took the various requirements for the classes of students and put them in a table, which I personally find to be very user-friendly and very helpful. And I think it's great. Thank Dr. Yanni for doing that. So I think that those are the 2 conceptual pieces why we're back here on our first read. So I just wanted to make sure everybody in the committee and the board saw that.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Wallach. Yes, Ms.
I
Knight?
think, did you mention number 3 there on?
I just talked about it in general. But
Okay.
But yes, the guideline number 3 about tuition was a main issue we talked about last time in terms of creating flexibility, I believe.
Great. Excellent.
And I think if you look in the chart, for some of the categories, there were some descriptions of tuition relief in the old version when it was in paragraph form. And now most of those have either been deleted or changed so that the flexibility now exists overall in guideline number 3 of this committee.
Excellent. Yes, a chart soothes my soul. There's nothing quite like it. So, and Dr. Yanni says you're welcome to this, who have shared their appreciation for the chart. Thank you very much. Anybody else? Mr. Schroeder?
I'll just add that, yeah, the chart's a big win. It was like an awful lot of text and very difficult to sort of compare section to section. And now, so now that we can, there is, there's a natural desire to see, okay, what's different about these groups? And they all do say, students in this class shall be entitled to all free school privileges and duties afforded to the resident school-age children of the district. So I would suggest just pulling that out and make the table a little shorter because it applies to all of them, pull it out into the general section. I do have a question about the tuition relief as it landed in this version.
Okay.
So in bullet number 3, it says basically that anyone who would be charged tuition may apply, may request tuition relief. In the table, it's very specific. For instance, in class 4, it says parents, guardians of a 12th grade student who has attended upper Dublin schools for at least 2 years may seek tuition relief. And then it doesn't say anything about it for what was the other one? For class 1, there's nothing in that additional information about tuition relief. So I feel like there's a sort of a confusion for me whether that class 4 allowance is in conflict or, both things, but, if you're in class 4 but you don't meet that requirement that's in the last column, may you apply for tuition relief? It sort of says you can in bullet 3.
It really doesn't only apply in that class, is what you're suggesting.
Yeah, I'm a little, it's not clear to me how tuition relief applies, I guess in that particular circumstance. There's some specific language around both. If the specific language is what we mean in class 1 and class 4, which are the only classes that require tuition,
Right.
then I don't think we need bullet 3. Or if we mean for it to be just period, you may apply for tuition relief if you'll be charged tuition, then we don't need it in the table. So I'm not sure which is where we want to land with that, but I don't think it should be the way it is.
Okay, thank you.
And can I comment on
Yes, go ahead.
So I think, and Art, correct me if I'm wrong, the number 4 was always in there. Were you paying attention, Art? Did I call on you and you weren't ready? That was already in there, that if you had a senior and you were moving out of the district, and then we totally added brand new the class 3, where it says you can apply for tuition relief regardless of what grade you're in. So I think that's where that's coming from.
Yeah, I think yeah.
I think we'll just, you can just go back to Dr. Yanni to clarify the tuition relief.
Yep, it's in my notes.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Any other comments or questions from any members of the board regarding this?
I'll just say that I think I think there's only a couple of likely outcomes of that resolution, and whatever that turns out to be is not a substantive change. So I'm comfortable moving this ahead to the legislative meeting with the understanding that we should see some edit between today and the legislative meeting.
Okay. Hold please. Let's see what the man in the airplane has to say. All the classes were in the previous policy. So it appears that this was probably more, so we can address whether or not the language needs to change.
I think that
Procedure.
the guidance for class 4, everybody right, but I think that was a message from prior policies. I think it sets a parameter in a sense that might still be helpful. I hear the point that if you're not within those parameters, can you still apply? I think theoretically the answer is yes. So where I come at is maybe what's in that box for class 4, if it's good to have it as a guideline, it might be better served in an AR, so somebody has that as a reference point. It's just a suggestion for the administration.
Okay. And procedurally, Mark, you're suggesting that perhaps we can continue to move this forward to legislative. Mr. Wallach, where do you want to weigh in?
I agree. I think that it's just either,
Either
modifying or
pull it out
clarifying,
modify
pull
it.
it out, move it around, whatever, but I don't think it's
Right.
substantively changing anything because as long as we leave guideline number 3, which is, I think, the important overarching language that we have created.
And is there anything that you're in agreement?
I think so, because I think the number 4 is really, you don't have to qualify, financially to get that relief. That's the difference between the 4 and the 3. Right.
All right, well then, Ms. Hinton, you have your path to walk. Appreciate that. And next up, we have policy 215, and this is regarding promotion and retention. And this is also a second first read. Mr. Wallach, Mr. Sorita, Ms. Ionini, anything that you would like to sort of add based on last month's conversation? It looks like there was a fair amount of editing around the promotion requirements.
Yeah, I mean, I think that some of the language was moved, like from authority, got moved later on. I also know that under delegation of responsibility, we had some discussion last time about equitable access to instruction, I believe, and that language was included. So I think there was enough that was being substantively changed in addition to just moving around that required a second first read.
Okay, thank you. Anybody with comments or questions now about the updated draft of the policy?
So I have two, I guess they're questions for the rest of the committee. One is, so down towards the very bottom of the policy, last 2 paragraphs, progress toward high school graduation, that paragraph says the new language to earn the number of credits established by the district instead of mandated by the board for graduation. I don't remember why we felt the need to change that. We do mandate a number of credits in policy for graduation. So why aren't we just, what was wrong with?
And we had that whole conversation at Education Committee about this very topic, which is
We
kind of
did.
ironic.
Yeah.
That's a good question that I don't know the answer to since I wasn't here. Apologies.
You remember, Jeff or Jen?
I don't, I guess thinking it through, I mean, yes, that will be set forth in policy as we talked about, but the district is establishing that policy subject to our approval.
Yeah.
And it strikes me as a little bit different than a mandate of the board because it seems like the credit requirements, although I'm sure there's a code requirement for some kind of minimum threshold, there's flexibility above that. So I'm wondering if the language change was to put a fine point on that distinction, but I don't know for sure.
Well, it's really the word established that's rubbing me the wrong way, I think.
Dr. Yanni says it can be changed back.
Okay, I mean, yeah, we don't establish credits, and that's technically how it reads right now.
Yeah.
Mandated by either the district or the board, I'd be fine with either.
Yeah, yeah, I'm fine with either too. It's the word established that
Okay.
just seems funny to me. And then the next one is the paragraph right below that. Students must accumulate the minimum total credits for promotion to the next grade, as stated in the AR. And I just wanted to make sure, and I think this is correct. The board doesn't actually have anything to say about promotion from grade to grade. That is purely an administrative decision. We only specify graduation. Am I right about that?
I think so, yeah. I think that's correct. In fact, I think that the policy says that the principal actually has, it's under delegation of responsibility, the principal has the final responsibility for determining promotion or retention of each student. So I would assume that would apply even at the high school level as well. I think.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that it says high school specifically and not grade to grade.
But grade to grade, you don't use credit, so maybe the distinction of that last sentence is to call that out.
That's probably.
That is, yeah. That is correct, Dr. Yanni said. Thank you, Mr. Well done.
Is he watching us live? Should we
He
say
is.
that?
Yeah,
See.
we're all gonna wave at the end.
Yeah.
So that's correct. All right,
All
so
right,
it
that
sounds
was-
like we're gonna just look to at least utilize the word mandated either by the board or the district as the revision in the second to last paragraph. We're good with the rest. Anybody else? Mrs. Trippier.
Yeah, I'm still a little uneasy about the parents and guardians section. In all cases of retention, parents, guardians shall be informed of the possibility of retention of a student as soon as possible. Is there any way that parents can be requesting that? Can it be initiated? It feels a little bit that it's a one-way direction. And I don't know if that is the intent.
Interesting.
And it's probably pretty rare for that to happen, but I could see some circumstances where parents may actually request retention.
Well, for example, there's, the regulation in the state that explicitly allows,
That's correct.
Exactly, so I don't know, to me it reads very much as a one direction. And I don't know if that's the intent. From my perspective, that's probably not what we want, but maybe there is a very good reason for that to be phrased like that, and maybe AR as an issue of addressing that a little bit more. But I just wanted to get a sense where.
you could, without really changing anything, you could change the sentence to read, in cases of retention initiated by the district, parents and guardians shall be.
Okay, so Dr. Yanni has indicated that parents can always request retention, but the principal does have the final say, and that the regulation from last year was only a one-time event that superseded our policy. So, going back to what Mr. Sirota just stated, restate the suggestion because it might actually solve this.
In cases of retention initiated by the district, parents and guardians shall be informed of the possibility as soon as possible.
Well, the question would be though, at times, parents do perhaps make a request that the educational team does not agree with. And I don't know, but I suspect that there are times that we do not concur with a retention.
But this is specifically about notification. This isn't about a decision, right?
And also,
I see.
to me, this is directed at district-initiated retention and the procedures for that. There is an AR that I'm sure will accompany this with a schedule and process, and presumably within that process, if a parent wanted to, they could. But from a policy perspective, I think this is more focused on what Mr. Sirota said, and I like his clarification. We want to make it clearer in policy.
Okay,
I have a comment on that before.
go ahead.
Okay, so to me, part of this policy is we are telling the administration that they have to do everything possible to avoid retention. Okay, because we know that often retention is not in the best interest of children. There's longer studies that they're less likely to graduate, have self-esteem problems. So I just think we have to be really careful how we change this wording. We don't want to give the administration an ability to water down what we're trying to do, which is give the students equitable access to promotion.
In
Right.
cases where the principal or district or whatever word you want to use feels retention is in the best interest of the students, parents and guardians shall be.
Yeah, I would suggest maybe we offer up the opportunity to Dr. Yanni to rework that phrasing at the beginning of the paragraph there, and would suggest that those on the committee, maybe either we could email, or I know this kid's taking notes as well, but let him monkey around with that a little bit and get back to us. It feels like this is one policy that has taken a lot to get where we are. And retention is a very sensitive topic. It just is. So how do we feel about the next steps? Are we prepared to, with some of these, potential, changes, move forward?
Or do we want to?
I'm comfortable putting it before the full board, and we'll review those minor wording changes, presumably minor wording changes, at the legislative meeting, and if we decide to send it back, we'll send it back then.
Okay, that's fine with me.
I'll go with that.
Okay, Jen? Excellent. All right, well, thanks. That was another good discussion. I appreciate it very much. And that moves us on to policy 818, contracted services. This policy has not yet been reviewed. We haven't really talked about it. It really looks at cost-effective educational programming and services not otherwise available in the district. It does mention our equitable practices, which I was appreciative of, as, having a way to provide for those. Does anybody have any comments or questions regarding the use of sort of independent contractors across the board to provide services?
You didn't really think I'd have nothing to say, did you?
No, I look this way first,
Yeah.
because I know if I look over here, no, I'm kidding. That's why you're on this committee, Mark.
I appreciate, as you said, the trying to work in the equitable practices language, but I think it's awkward where it is. It implies that we're really only talking, and it's only in the purpose,
Correct.
to be clear. So the purpose is not, is not legalese normally, but it does say, it does imply that we're talking about only things not available for the purpose of implementation of equitable practices. Like, I think we're really talking about services not available within the district, period. And I feel like that sentence works a lot better without to ensure the implementation of equitable practices. I would rather put it in guidelines to say that when we do contract with anyone to provide any service within the district, equitable practices are an important component of the selection, monitoring, et cetera, of those contractors, that we need to ensure, we, the board, are directing the administration to ensure that in the selection and implementation of an outside service, that equitable practices are maintained.
See, I interpreted that differently, so I'm just gonna hold my thought and see if anyone else.
I did too. I actually,
Okay.
I kind of liked it where it was because, originally they just said in order to provide cost-effective programs. And I think that limited to say, unless it's a cost-driven decision, contracted services aren't useful. So I think with Dr. Yanni's additional language, it broadens it to say it can be cost-effective, it can be for educational programming services not available, but all under the penumbra of ensuring equitable practices. So to me, it kind of sets a theme that belongs in purpose. Now, if, Mark, what you're saying is that you also want to make sure that contracted services within themselves are equitable, maybe we need some language to that effect later on as well, but I kind of like it up front there.
I see you reading it. I totally didn't see it,
That's what.
but I see it.
Yeah.
Right, so there's a bunch of reasons why equitable practices may be necessary, and I think cost, and they're not just about being cost effective, and that's what I think you're saying, Jeff, and I agree with that. I don't think the purpose needs to say why we might be implementing equitable services at all. Maybe we drop cost effective as well, in order to provide services not available within the district.
That was my comment. Because I think what we're trying to say there is that the only purpose I don't think we're trying to say it, but it comes across as saying, we're just doing this to save money.
Yeah.
And there are situations, social workers and individual related services folks that we don't have on tap that we need to provide the equitable services for students who need support, a differentiated instruction or whatever it is. So that's how I took it. Equitable was actually providing for those special services that allow for equitable instruction. So I took it almost a third way. So I think if we do, I like this suggestion, cut out cost effective, because to everyone's point, this is really just about needing to supplement what we have on staff with whatever we need.
And that can change from year to year, and
Month to month, yeah.
yeah, and this kid is nodding, so I feel that is a good sign, because she has to do all the hiring.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have that in the notes to reword and relook at equitable practices and cost effective to those points.
Okay, thank you. And Mrs. Sharkey?
Yeah, just a clarification. I read it as very much services provided in person. What about services be provided virtually? Is there any?
Where does it imply in person?
Well, I mean, when I read with requirements of employees or property must contain a provision requiring the providers of those contracted services to notify. I mean, it just seems that I have the feeling that or the impression that this is very much in person.
When it was written, it probably did not contemplate.
Right, and that's what I'm wondering, do we need to specify that, or is it general enough to include in-person and virtual?
Dr. Davis?
But see, I think it goes beyond just in-person and virtual. I think that when you look at a special needs population, those equitable services could be anything.
Yeah, off-site.
And so, it's very, very broad. So I see this as being all-encompassing, because I think it's all of those services. So I think it certainly would include virtual, but I think it goes beyond that as well.
But I don't see the language as being limiting. I
No, I
think it's
don't
broad
either.
enough to cover
Well,
both,
that's what
I
I was unsure, if it was broad enough to include all types of services that we could consider there.
Yeah, see, I feel that because of the way it's written, it does include all.
Yeah, no, this is not
That's
my
how I
area,
saw it.
this is not my area of expertise, that's just.
That's why we have the meeting. That's good. Thank you for asking the question. We appreciate that.
I do see, another place, to Titia's point, is in the authority section, it talks about, we were required by law to ensure that anyone who has direct contact with students has their right background checks, which, sort of implies it's a direct student contact kind of thing. So I can see where you might come to that conclusion, but it doesn't say that, it just says you don't have to do that if they don't have student contact. But this particular sentence doesn't belong in authority. This should be, in guidelines probably, right after the all contract.
Oh, yeah, good point. This is not, this is a guideline. And to that end, my question about the background checks, it has become somewhat more extensive in terms of FBI, the criminal checks and fingerprinting and all that. I didn't know, Ms. Kitten, if we wanted to expand the language here to say, with the mandatory background check requirements, and then in parentheses, maybe put, I don't know if you can put examples, or if you want to say, as per applicable state law, because it seems to be evolving over time. They have new technologies, so now we have fingerprinting. And
We can certainly look at that. We always have our guidelines on our websites and written into our contracts with our contracting services, so they know exactly what they are mandated to provide.
Right. I just don't want it to appear that we're only asking for the criminal history and the child abuse check if we indeed are asking for some other things.
Absolutely, and we are.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else for policy 818? Excellent, thank you so much. Another good discussion, I appreciate that. And on to our last item for this evening, policy 916, volunteers. And Dr. Yanni poses the question to us as we consider this, what if any information should be moved from the AR to the policy? And that is something we can certainly discuss. Anybody want to kick it off? Questions or comments? Mr. Wallach, Ms. Aini?
All right.
Go ahead.
Okay, I think the word equity needs to be in here, but I do have a question about this policy, because it's like we're talking directly to the teachers. And do we normally do that in our policies?
Not in a 900 policy, in a 200 policy.
In 200 policy, okay. You know, I go to a lot of the equity and empowerment subcommittee meetings, and one of the things that I think those meetings are about is people have issues and they're not always comfortable bringing them up in situations like PTAs and those types of meetings. So it would be great if we could look at our volunteer policies that involve our volunteers and just make them better, make them more welcoming, make them more equitable. But I do feel, this feels different to me because it's like we're talking directly to teachers.
Well, I see what you're saying about the last sentence under purpose. It's probably where you're seeing that.
Yes, and purpose.
Most of the purpose section doesn't really read like policy language to me at all, anyway. You know, volunteers play an important role in the life of all district students is probably something we all strongly agree with, and not really policy language. But it's okay to me in a purpose section. The problem, I think the reason you pick up on that, Jen, is because there's no meat in this policy. It's all in the AR. And so you're looking for where the meat is, and that's sort of the meatiest sentence that's in here.
But isn't that I'm sorry to interrupt, Mark.
Yeah.
You weren't done? Go ahead. I was gonna say, but isn't that sort of by design? Because the way I look at the AR, it's got the requirements for clearances and volunteer approvals and, you know, various procedures you have to follow and guidelines and such. Which to me, going back to Dr. Yanni's question, I think all stays in the AR, it's not policy. And so I think on a certain level, the language of this policy not having a lot of meat is because it's saying we're going to have a lot of administrative requirements that are in the AR.
That's exactly where I'm going.
You know, and maybe the policy can be even shortened to say that more directly.
Yeah, the policy is really only here to have an AR.
Right.
Because when I look through the AR, to answer Dr. Yanni's question, what if anything should be moved to policy? The only thing that I think should be moved to policy that I see is anything that is specific to complying with law.
Yep.
And there are a couple things. You know, all volunteers must reapply every 60 months. I'm pretty sure that's from law. There's a few other, of those kinds of things. But we don't have to move those into policy, but I do think the policy needs to be explicit that an AR, that the accompanying AR must address the law. Implement the requirements of the law.
So Dr. Yanni has some comments.
Yeah.
To Jen's point, yes, we can make the policy more welcoming. To Mark and Jeff, the policy really only needs to say, you have to get your clearances, which is indeed what you were just indicating, and everything else is going to be sort of how we handle it behind the scenes. I think what I would like to see, and I think it's there, but perhaps this is what you're talking about, could be expanded upon, that first sentence, volunteers play an important role in the quality of life in all district students. If that's so, it's not only that they volunteer in the classrooms, and I think what you're sensing and what I've sensed in this policy in particular, it's like, these are the classrooms that go in and volunteer in classrooms as like parent, classroom captains or what have you. We have a much more robust volunteer program, including a number of volunteer committees and our PTOs and PTAs, and it's so much more robust than this. So I think beyond being welcoming, it just needs to be broader, that the purpose is that we are welcoming of parent and community volunteers that enhance the curriculum and the education of our students. That's what we do. And the requirement to be one of those volunteers is you have to meet all the legal standards. The clearances, paperwork, timely reapplication, whatever it is. And then the rest of it, to your point, can be handled in the AR as the district sees fit. Whether principals want to allow or classroom teachers want to allow all that. But would that solve, I think, some of your concerns, Jen, if we made it more open, more robust around the purpose for having volunteers is because it enhances the education and the curriculum. And it's across domains, it's not just in the classroom.
Yeah, so if we put something about equity in there, say the last sentence, say variety of opportunities for parents and community involvement and to strengthen partnerships between school, home, and community in an equitable manner.
I mean, listen, I don't have a problem with, I think if you're trying to get at I think we need to figure out what aspect of equity it enhances. We want our parents from all different backgrounds, all different perspectives to be included in the life of the school district, right? So I think we find a way to say that in purpose. I mean, if you want to say explicitly equity, I'm sure Dr. Yanni can work that in, but I actually think that this last sentence is too restrictive. It's not just, we don't just have volunteers and working with teachers in classrooms. We have them on equity subcommittees. We have them working with, when we have robots before and parents would come in and work with the robots with the kids in the libraries. Like, there's all kinds of things that have happened. It's not just teachers directing that. So that for me is too restrictive.
So who are we directing if we're not directing the teachers?
I actually think we are directing the administration to provide the appropriate guidelines and restrictions to parent community volunteers.
That's all policy ever does.
Right.
That's the
They're
advantage.
not directing to the teachers. And you're absolutely right before that reads weird.
Yeah, it felt weird.
In very scientific terms, it's weird.
And to be clear, in terms of the concept of making it more welcoming, I mean, this is a 900 section policy. This addresses community
Correct.
Kinds of things. But the reality is nobody reads this unless they're directed to read it because they did something wrong. I mean, 99 times out of 100, that's going to be why someone reads this if they read it at all. I don't think, this isn't the handbook, the volunteer handbook that we're putting out. This is policy. This is the rules by which you must behave if you're going to be a part of this process.
Yeah.
So I don't know that I even agree with the concept of making it more welcoming. I do agree with the concept of sort of expanding it and recognizing, who it's directed to and acknowledging that equity is an important component of volunteerism and how important volunteerism is across the whole thing and not just in the classroom. And I agree with all of that. And I do think there's a way to make it say that in policy. But I don't think welcoming is a word I would,
That's fair.
that I would use.
I would concur. I think what I was trying to get at was more what you're saying.
So what I'm imagining is if we, say you need to get your clearances, but it's only offered a small window of time, like on a lunch, 12 to 2. We don't want the administration to set that up. We want to make it so everyone has access to turn in their clearances.
So to me, that's a procedural.
But we need to, that's what we need the word, right. But the words in here, when we say equitable, that's what we need. Everybody.
Okay, so I was stating it again totally differently.
So I'm trying to illustrate why we need the words.
But I think if you're talking about an equitable process for allowing volunteers in, I was talking about equitable sort of presentation to the students from all different kinds of volunteers that would allow for our equity initiatives to move forward. So I think it's two different things. So what you're talking about to me goes in the procedural language in the AR.
It can go in delegation of responsibility. We can do the board, where we direct, so delegation of responsibility is where we direct the administration to create a process by which people can become volunteers.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong, I mean, it's really quite appropriate, in fact, to say in delegation of responsibility that process that they create must be equitable for the volunteers. It's not for the students, but it's for the volunteers. And I think, so now that I think I understand Jen's point.
Correct, now I got it.
I think that's where it goes.
Very good.
And I don't have language off the top of my head to propose there, but we in its first reading.
Yeah, no, and I think we've given plenty of fodder for Dr. Yanni to rework this. Does anyone else have any sort of final comments or questions? I think we've got a good place to start from.
The only thing I was gonna add, and I agree with all that, and I think it's great to work that in. I believe at some point, hopefully this year, or the general equity policy, I think, is gonna come back to us. I think all of these things may ultimately be subsumed within that at the end of the day. That's not to say that we shouldn't also have that kind of language in individual policies, but I think that we'll be able to address that on a much broader scope down the road.
That's a great point. And I think what's nice about this is if we can leave it somewhat broad and open-ended, then we can fall back on some of the policies like you're talking about. Okay, excellent. I thank you all so much. The next item on our agenda is community input. Seeing as we have no in-person, well, or are we getting, we have one. Seeing as no one is coming forward for in-person community input and we received no written comments or questions, I will open and now close community input. And before we go, I do have one little thing to say. This is my last policy committee as chair, my last policy committee period. I would like to make a humble request of my board colleagues, both present and future. It has been one of the highlights of my tenure to have encouraged the board to move policy committee meetings out of the daytime and into the evenings. It is maybe not glamorous, but it is the fundamental work of the board to establish, review, revise, update policy. And I think the discussions that we've had in this public forum with each other and for the community have been extremely valuable. And I am grateful that all of you sort of went along with this madness and supported that when I asked, and I hope that it will continue. Because as part of the equity discussions we've been having, daytime meetings are not something I would be able to attend, and I would sorely miss an opportunity to come back and spend some more time with you. So I thank all of you. I love these discussions. It's really important work. And I wish those serving going forward the very, very best. With that, we have come to an end here tonight. We do not have a set time or place for our next policy committee, so I would expect an announcement at a future board meeting. And with that, thanks to probably all 5 people watching at home, Mom, Dr. Yanni, thanks so much for participating. This meeting is adjourned.